38 officer in need.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 1078 Project podcast. Hey, if you're new to the podcast, a little bit about our organization. The 1078 Project is a nonprofit organization that's been founded and developed by law enforcement officers who have been involved in critical incidents and officer-involved shootings. Our goal is to provide spiritual resources, practical resources, and mental health resources to law enforcement officers and their families within the first 24 to 48 hours of being involved in an officer-involved shooting or critical incident. In November of 2022, I was involved in an officer-involved shooting, and the days and weeks that follow left me feeling extremely anxious and alone. My goal and the goal of our organization is to ensure that no other officer or his or her family has to feel that way. With that being said, we're going to start off the podcast. Today's guest is one of my best friends. He's a defensive tactics instructor. He is a criminal investigator, a former Marine, a combat veteran, and an overall fantastic dude. Today's guest is Joseph Judge. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 1078 Project podcast. Today's guest is Joe Judge. He's a dear friend of mine, one of my best buddies. I'm really looking forward to interviewing him and hearing his story. So, what's up, Joe?
Hey, what's going on?
Welcome in.
Thank you.
It's weird to talk to you in this weird, in this forum. You know, with everybody else that I'm not super close with, it seems normal to have this conversation. But with an actual friend, it seems a little weird to sit across with podcast mics in front of our face and talk. But
this is a nice little setup you have here.
Yeah, dude.
I'm only doing this because I believe your intentions are good, and that's for a great cause, in my opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate it, dude. So. I really do. So the big part of this podcast is about humanizing cops and about, kind of telling individual stories of what your life is like and what makes Joe Joe and what makes Joe tick. And I think a big part of that is your childhood and how you grew up and the things that you went through growing up. So
sure.
We'll kind of start the podcast off there, and we'll roll from there, but I'll open it up to you with where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in a lovely city, Jennings.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So, actually, I lived in Country Club Hills, which is within Jennings. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. When I grew up in Jennings, my parents were married. I went to Corpus Christi.
Oh, that was our arch enemy, dude. Corpus Christi, and there's one other one that was our arch. I went to Good Shepherd.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it's our arch enemy in sports.
So, yeah, I went to Corpus Christi. As you know, I was one of the few white kids that were in Jennings. I had a couple close friends that kind of kept me out of trouble. Especially, so I'll just get right to it. So when I was a young kid, my dad was an alcoholic, did not treat us well. So I would hang out with my best friend at the time, who I'm still close to this day. That was kind of my way of getting out of things. It affected my school life. In third grade, I ran away from school, ended up failing third grade. Fast forward, when I graduated Corpus Christi as an 8th grade student, my parents moved to Highland, Illinois. So it was going from
the city to
one
the country.
Side of the world to the other, yeah. Right? So I was one of the few white kids growing up in Jennings to predominantly white area out in, I don't want to say the sticks, but it was more country.
Yeah, it's pretty rural.
Yeah, it's fairly rural. So I went there. I didn't feel like I really fit in. So I had a couple close friends. I was drinking a lot, barely showed up to school.
How old were you when you guys moved to Highland? How old do you think you said? Did you say 8th grade?
No, going into my freshman year.
Okay.
So my brother, we're 3.5 years apart, so he would have been in 6th grade. And then my sister is 3.5 years younger, or 3 years younger than my brother.
What moved you guys to Highland?
Just to get out. Like, Jennings was getting really bad.
Yeah.
And, we had to get out. So
What'd your dad do for a living?
He worked for Anheuser-Busch.
Okay.
So he was a brewer there.
No way.
Yeah. And then my mother stayed home with us. I think one of my classmates in 8th grade, actually that's what it was, his family moved to Highland, Illinois. And we learned about it from them. And then my mom was close with his mother and liked the area, so we decided to move to Highland. My freshman year, like I said, I didn't really feel like I could fit in with that environment.
Yeah, it's two different worlds.
Two entirely different worlds. So I had a low self-esteem. You just reminded me of something. So because I was going to go to Aquinas and pay for private school, right?
Yeah.
For high school. And they wanted to save money because they knew they wanted to move to Highland. So I actually lived with my buddy when they moved out there for the first quarter of my freshman year.
You lived with a friend?
A friend and their family.
Really? So you could stay in the same school, or?
So I could go to the public school in Highland, Illinois, because that's where we were going to move.
Oh, okay.
So I lived with my buddy's family and his dad at the time, who I thought was very strict. We would get home from school. Before we do anything, he'd make us do our homework. For that one quarter, that was the only time I got straight A's.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So then my parents ended up selling the house at Country Club Hills, moving to Highland, Illinois. I moved in with them, and then my dad's alcoholism got worse. My mom began to self-medicate on Xanax and opiates and all that stuff. So she was just constantly in bed, and I basically had free reign to do whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah, JoJo's does not do well with free reign, dude.
No. So I'd skip school all the time. I went from straight A's to D's and F's.
Really?
I was really good in soccer in 8th grade or in grade school, right? That was a sport that I excelled in. I wanted to fit in, so I played football. Very rarely would I show up to practice. I remember when I made varsity, I skipped a football game to go out drinking. So that didn't work out well. My senior year, I skipped so many days of school, and it came down to my final exam to graduate. And my buddy at the time, I ended up, by the grace of God, I passed that final exam, graduated high school, and a friend of mine was joining the Marine Corps, asked me to join with him on the buddy program. So I said, sure, I got to get out of this. And because of, the struggles in my home life, I said, I have nothing else to lose. I joined the Marine Corps in 2000.
So when you were growing up and you said you're out drinking and stuff, do you think that was your way of dealing with the home life stuff? Is that you were trying to self-medicate, or was it just a release, or what do you think?
I think that it plays a big part with addiction. I have an addictive mindset combined with the self-medication with my home life.
Yeah.
It was just a recipe for disaster, looking back at it. And as I struggled in school, my self-esteem got really low. It carried on into the beginning portion of my Marine Corps career. So the irony in this is my buddy who convinced me to join the Marine Corps, we're in boot camp, he gets injured, he gets out, I finish boot camp. So I signed up as an infantryman, 0311. So I graduated boot camp in San Diego, MCRD. I was stationed at Camp Pendleton.
I never went through the military or anything, so describe boot camp for me.
It's 12 weeks long. You're not allowed to go anywhere. When I was in 2000, it was still, I don't want to say it was like the old days where they would like physically beat you up, but it was strict. They had a set of rules you had to abide by. You get up a certain time, on the same day, same time every day. It was a structure that I was just not used to whatsoever, so I had trouble with that. Toward the end, actually get your Eagle Globe and Anchor. You had to go through the Crucible. That's toward the end of boot camp. Did that. They give you your Eagle Globe and Anchor, and then
What's the Crucible?
It's
I think I've heard about it. It's like Hell Week.
Yeah, like Hell Week, but like a watered down version of that. Something. It's just I forgot how many days it is. I think it's 1 day, 2 days. Anyway, it's kind of like Hell Week. And then once you complete that, then they consider you a Marine. They give you your Eagle Globe and Anchor, and then you sit down with your drill instructors. And then they assign you your duty station, where you're going to go. I went to Camp Pendleton in California. I was stationed 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. With my company, it was Kilo. So let me rewind that, go back. After boot camp, you go on leave. Then they, since I was in the infantry, they flied me out for my other, it's called the school SOI, School of Infantry. I believe that is 8 weeks long. You go there and you just learn basically like the weapons, kind of just the very basics of what you're going to do as a rifleman.
What year was this, do you think?
Well, I signed up in 2000, so I was in from 2000 to 2004.
Okay.
So boot camp is 12 weeks long, and then we go on leave for, I believe, a week or two, and then I go right into SOI, the School of Infantry. That's
How'd you do on the week that you had off?
Oh, man, I was out just going crazy, right? So I came back, went to SOI, completed that, and that was in Camp Pendleton. And then from there, I was assigned to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. I was with Kilo Company, and with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, essentially you have Kilo Company, India Company, Lehman Company, and weapons. So we're all together with 3rd Battalion. That's where we go when we ever deploy.
The whole battalion deploys together.
Exactly. So I remember graduating the School of Infantry, getting assigned to my unit, my company, thinking like, all right, I'm one of you guys. Well, now you're considered a new Marine, right? So I remember it, me with all the other boots. We walk in, and the way the barracks was set up, it was, from what I remember, is you had like a basketball court, and then the barracks were set up like almost like a U, right? And then a catwalk outside. And so when we were assigned to our company, we all line up on the basketball court. And so like all the senior Marines could see us, and we're thinking, oh, okay, we're brothers now. And that wasn't the case. They're like, you fucking boots. You know what I mean? It was like you're going to prison. You're like, what the hell? I'm one of you guys.
We're friends, man. We all got to do this together.
And then hazing was a big part at that point. So
what was a boot's duties? Like, what did you have to do? Like, what was the things that you guys had to do? I'm guessing the boot did everything, and the other guys kind of...
Yeah, it was, well, as a new Marine, right? So within the platoon, right? So you're assigned to a platoon with. So I'm with Kilo Company. Kilo Company has, it's been a while. It's been almost 20 years. 3 platoons, and then each platoon has 4 fire teams. Fire teams set up in 4. So you have a saw gunner, or you have fire team leader, point man, saw gunner, and one more rifleman, if I'm not mistaken, like that carries an M16 at the time. So we had the fire team leader carried 206, the grenade launcher deal that's attached to the M16. Mm-hmm. Then you had your point man who carried an M16. Then you had an additional Marine that was just had an M16, and then you had the saw gunner, which was set up to lay suppression against the enemy so we can bound up, right? So when I was assigned to my fire team, I was the new Marine, so I got the 249 saw, and I was big at the time. I was strong. So I carried that.
Did nobody want to carry it?
Oh,
it was
hell
heavy?
no. It was heavy. it was heavy.
How much do you think it weighed?
Oh, man. I don't remember. It wasn't necessarily the saw that was heavy. It was the fact that you had to carry the saw. Then you had to carry an extra barrel, an A-bag, they call it. And then if we were combat ready, then I had a drum, a 200-round drum.
Oh, that's probably super heavy.
To the saw with 3 drums of ammunition. So they'd put that drum into like a little pouch. 3 of them, you carry them. That's what made it heavy.
That's super heavy.
And then you had your pack, your vest. But so no, when I went to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines with all the other new Marines, I remember my captain, who was he was a good guy, but back then, hazing was allowed. It wasn't supposed to be, but it was. I mean, you just did what everyone did it and went through it. And I remember him saying for our first weekend out, for that we would call Liberty, right? So you would fall into formation before Liberty, Friday evening, and they would tell you, make sure you don't get married, don't do anything stupid, wear a condom, just all that stuff. And I remember him saying, like, all right, now all you senior Marines, don't haze the boots too much. We need them. I'm like, motherfucker, so, and the game was on, so we would get assigned a room in the barracks. We had a roommate, and me and my roommate, I remember the new Marines came in, they're drinking, drunk. They would make us, we would call it field day, so we would have to clean everything spotless, and then a couple hours later, they would go and, check like underneath the bed that no one would ever check, and they would find like a little bit of dust or something like that. Like, nope, do it again. So we're out all night, and then they'd make us go on runs up this hill. So we had this, I'm pretty sure that was the hill they called Mount Motherfucker. And we'd go up that hill and then come back down. It's just a bunch of bullshit, but everyone had to do it. So
so they would do this after you guys were all, like, guys would go out, get liquored up, and then you come back, and then they would make you check everything?
Oh, no, we were sober. They were get drunk. Oh, they were in their rooms getting drunk. They'd make us go on runs, clean our barrack, our room and stuff,
Okay, that makes sense.
That was the hazing, right?
Yeah.
So that was for about 2002, for about probably a year, and then we actually got deployed to Okinawa, Japan. So when we went there, it was a 6-7 month deployment. The new Marines, me still being technically a new Marine, and I think there was 12 others that were new Marines. We had to draw straws to see who would stay in Okinawa while the other new Marines, while the battalion would actually go on a ship, and they would, I forgot what that was called, but they would deploy to basically Singapore, Bangkok, Thailand. So you had like a Westpac where you go to like Australia, and then there was another one. Mm-hmm. They went to Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, Bangkok.
So my dad was in the Navy, and that's his ship just drove Marines around.
Yeah.
And he went to, Philippines. He went to all those Asian countries.
Well, I drew the short straw. And so I had to stay while they
got to go have fun.
Go have fun, right? And I stayed. We call it the Rock. And it was day on, day off. I was basically security guard. I would man the gate, and just check cards and let people come and go. And it was day on, day off for almost 7 months.
Oh, man.
So that's when my drinking really got bad. So I started drinking every other day, like every day that I was off, right? And I was getting in fights all the time. And I remember in high school, I was always scared to like punch someone in the face without a boxing glove or something. And I remember in the Marine Corps, I was with a fellow Marine, and I remember we were drunk, and I ended up punching this guy in the face. I think I knocked him out, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this is easy. So then it was like all the time.
Yeah.
Like I was always starting fights, and luckily I was I had some by the grace of God, like I had some senior Marines that looked out for me in that sense, And so go ahead.
What would be like? Did you ever get in trouble?
So when we came back, I did one time, and then so when my unit came back from their deployment, when they went back to Okinawa. I remember I was so happy to see my fellow Marines, they came back and we went out and got all screwed up. And me and a friend of mine had this bright idea to start a fight with one of the other companies within our unit. And in Okinawa, so I told you that the barracks in Camp Pendleton, it was a catwalk outside. I think it was 2-3 stories. And, you had the railing and you can look out, look at the basketball court. Well, in Okinawa, everything was inside. So we had this, everyone would eat after they drank. It was called taco rice and cheese. It was right outside base, it was very greasy. And one of my buddies, when we went into the barracks where where Kilo Company was, where my company, I don't know if one of the Marines said something like, hey, that's my shirt. So I don't know, something stupid, petty, but then my buddy punched him in the face. And then another friend tried to come in, or one of his buddies came in and tried to beat up my friend, and I end up punching him. And then another guy comes out, and then another Marine from our platoon comes out. Next thing you know, the fight's on. There's like 60 people, 60 Marines just beating each other up. Taco rice and cheeses everywhere. It's like an ice skating rink. And so my gunnery sergeant at the time, he's like, what the fuck? And he was like old school. So instead of like getting us in trouble, he knew we were all drunk. He's like, all right, everyone get your PT gear on. We're going on a run. Oh, so we had to go on like a 5-6 mile run. We're throwing up. Yeah, I mean, it was horrible, but we learned our lesson.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how we settled matters back then. I heard it's a little different now. I'm not sure, but I heard that,
Probably is. Probably is very different now.
So, anyway, we go back to the States.
At this point, like, what's the overall national, like, what's going on in the world? At
this point, nothing.
2000 and what?
So, 9/11, was that 2002?
2001.
Was that okay? So I signed up.
2001.
So I signed up in 2000. So with a little over a year, we were deployed to Okinawa in Japan. When we came back, everything was good. It was when that's funny you said that, because I'm going to lead up to that. No, everything's peaceful. Like nothing nothing to report, like anything crazy.
Yeah.
We get back to the States, and then we, I think it was a couple times a month, we would do our training out in the field. And then when 9/11 happened.
Did you go back to California when you came back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, yeah, no, it's fine. So that was my permanent station.
Yeah.
So for that 4 years, I was stationed in Camp Pendleton, and then I would deploy, and we'd go out from there.
Okay.
So when I came back to Camp Pendleton, like a few months later, the time frame's kind of foggy, but we came back. There was a period of time. Everything was fine. Then we resumed our training out in the field. So basically, we would go out and shoot shit and, just kind of prepare for battle, right?
Yeah.
Like just train for war. And then that's when 9/11 happened.
Was your role always the same through the whole time, too?
No. So at this point, I'm a saw gunner. They called us from our training out in the field. It was our captain or lieutenant colonel. Anyway, the whole unit, they called in the whole unit, and they said, all right, get, prepared, we're going to war. They bring us back. I look, and then I see on TV like 9/11. I'm like, holy shit. Like, we knew that it was time, but they were very secretive about it because they didn't want, I don't know if they didn't want the word getting out or whatever, but we didn't know when we were going. We just knew that we were going to go. And a short time after that, we went out drinking. I went to Riverside, California. I think I was talking to you earlier about that.
Yeah, there was
Riverside.
an officer-involved shooting in Riverside, California. Somebody reached out to me.
So we went to some club down there. That was probably the most sober I've been when I was drinking in the Marine Corps. And the cop pulls me over for, I don't know if it was like I didn't have my lights on or whatever. I was leaving the gas station. And I failed field sobriety at DWI. Was arrested. They towed my car, and how fucked up my mind was at the time was my buddy got my car out of the tow yard. And when I was released from jail from a DWI, I took my car and we went back out and drank. So I didn't care. I was literally like, me and all the Marines I was with, because like it's not like law enforcement in a sense to where you're out there, like you're training, like you're training to kill, right?
Yeah.
So you're you're with a bunch of alpha males who they want to fight, they want to do stupid shit. And so anyway, I get the DWI. Like a couple months later, within like a matter of a couple hours, they said, "All right, get your stuff. We're leaving." So they
give you a couple hours to get everything together.
Yeah, it was.
Did you have any
short.
notice that you guys were leaving?
No.
Really?
No, it was like that's what I'm saying. They're being very secretive about it. I didn't know if they just didn't want the word to get out. So,
do you think the DWI and that night of like going out and drinking after you guys found out that you're going to war, like did that have anything to do with it? Like finding out like, oh, all right, we're about to go to war.
No, that was, if I'm going to be honest, no.
Yeah.
Because I was not, I was very immature and with my family life and all that, it was just, I found a bunch of Marines who drank like me, who did stupid shit like me. But we were all very good and out in the field and in combat. That's when you can rely on us. But when we were in the States, we were trouble, right? So, anyway, we deployed Kuwait. We're there for a few months. And then again, we don't know when the invasion, like when Bush is going to declare war. But we know it's going to happen. And so we're right at the border of Kuwait and Iraq. And we drove Marines. We would ride in, they call them Amtraks. You know what that is?
I think so, yeah.
Amphibious motor vehicle with the track. So it goes from essentially from sea to land. That's what it's designed for. So like back in like World War II or whatever, you see those.
Like Beaches of Normandy type vehicle.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they're just more advanced now, right? Yeah. So They basically drop in from the ship, then they go onto the land.
Yeah, that's what my dad's ship did. It carried around those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Real quick, before we move on, are you still in contact with your family at home?
Yes.
Do you remember making the phone call to them saying, like, hey, I'm getting deployed and we're going to war?
No, I just remember because we didn't know we were going to the war at the time. We were going to Kuwait. So Bush didn't declare war. And at the time, like when we were over in Kuwait, we didn't have cell phones. There was one phone that was like this big, you know, like back in the old days, you know. Yeah. And so, no, I don't remember making that phone call. I wrote a lot of letters at the time. But, no. So anyway, I'm in Kuwait, and out of nowhere, they say, okay, we're going to war. And next thing you know, we load up in our Amtrak, and you can't see unless you're one of the Marines that are, like, looking out for surveillance, you know, observing everything. Other than that, you're stuck in this track, right? But I remember it was like, gave me like goosebumps. You just hear, they're just bombing the hell out of Iraq, right? And that went on for hours and hours.
Really?
Yes. And then finally, we invade. We go in. And
I think I remember watching videos of that where it's just like, I think they had cameras over the top and it was just bomb after bomb after bomb.
Oh,
after
man.
Bomb after bomb.
And if I'm not mistaken, like 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines at one point, like we were the actual tip of the spear.
Really?
During the invasion, yeah. And so the scariest time was not even when I was in a firefight. It was the unknown. So this is, let's see, I joined the Marines when I was 19 years old. So I must have been maybe 21 at this time. And I remember we invade, we're driving. Next thing you know, they stop, like the Amtrak stops. The back ramp opens. And because I'm the saw gunner, I'm the first one. I have to get out of there.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm the first one to run out of the vehicle, get in the prone to get ready to lay suppression so the other Marines can go. So I remember when that ramp dropped, I did. I was like, oh, my gosh, this is it. And then I remember running out like, don't shoot me, motherfucker. And dropping the prone. But at that point, everyone surrendered, right? So it was like it was nothing.
So were you actually in contact with people when you guys unloaded? Were there people that you guys were coming in contact with?
Like Iraqis?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're just surrendering?
Yes. Surrendering left and right.
Really?
Like it made it very, very easy. And then at one point during our invasion, we engage enemy fire. And there was, all I remember, this is so long ago because this wasn't one of the big ones, was we were near this creek bed and we're trying to go through. And at this point, we're low. We get assigned some more new Marines. Now, these are like equivalent to like my boots now.
We're low from what?
With Marines. We needed more Marines.
Okay.
So there was like 5, I think, Marines that were assigned to our platoon. And one of the Marines was given 249 saw, little guy, he should never had it. And
hey, bro, us little guys can do things.
No, like he was a thin guy, right? You're little, but you're strong. He was not. But anyway, I remember when he, I don't know if his saw jammed because back then we didn't know that you could put like you shouldn't put so much lube on your weapon when you're in sand, right? Yeah. When you're out in the desert, right? Because it'll just jam up. Well, in this case, his weapon jammed up, and with the saw, it's kind of like you rack it back. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he was trying to rack back. It kept locking up. And some of the Sea Marines were yelling at him to fire that weapon. And he's freaking out. So what he does is he sets the butt of the gun on the ground, puts his hand on top of the barrel, and starts trying to kickstart it back. You know what I mean? So when he did that, it went off.
Shot him in the hand?
Shot him in the hand, but not only that, because those rounds tumble. So it went through his hand, and then it came out.
They're designed to tumble, I guess?
Yes. And then it came out right near his elbow and tricep area.
No way.
Yeah. That was my first time I saw someone like get shot. I'm like, holy shit. And anyway, they ship him back. He had like surgery, like his hands. When I came back, like his he
That's
had no
a big
function.
round to take like that.
Yes.
Like,
well,
right
it was
to
a
the
5.56.
hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that close, like.
Oh yeah, I
My
know.
goodness,
direct
so
contact.
much velocity.
Yeah.
All the gas escaping straight through.
And it was
your hand.
tumbling.
Oh.
So it did a lot of damage. And there was a couple other little minor where we were engaged in like firefights where I remember at one time. So my Staff Sergeant Tejada, he was Puerto Rican from New York. He was a younger guy, very smart, but he was a hard ass. And he would talk like this,
Yeah.
And then I remember because it was like me and my close friends, we were like the alpha males at the time, we were strongest. And he's like, could you kill someone with your bare hands? And we're looking like, oh my gosh, like this fucking pussy. Like, the only reason why he's saying this is because he's Staff Sergeant. But anyway, we engaged in a firefight, and my saw jammed. And I remember a round fucking hitting the rock in front of me. Like, it's just ding. And so now I'm like taking the part, and my Staff Sergeant's like yelling at me. He's like, fire, fire. And I'm, I've had a couple of years now in the Marines. And I'm like, Staff Sergeant. I was like, don't you think I'm trying to fucking fire my weapon? And I'm taking it apart in front of him, right? And put it back together, and then I re-engage. And anyway, I'm going to lead into this because he ends up being one of the bravest Marines I've ever met.
Really?
So all that talk was true. He was a badass.
Yeah.
So fast forwarding, now Bush, I think he declared a ceasefire.
You guys moved pretty quick, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was like quick. It was swift. At the time, like everyone's giving up. Every now and then we would get in minor firefights. Like the one I told you where a round hit the rock in front of me. We engaged. Once I got it working, I laid suppression. There was, I don't know, a dozen Iraqis. They ran in this house. And I remember that house just getting blown to bits.
From artillery or from?
No, it wasn't from artillery. I think it was from a Cobra, if I'm not mistaken. It came down, just a helicopter.
Really?
Yeah. And so,
how well could those like walls, that type of wall? I don't even know what that material is, but like those.
Oh, like the mud.
Yeah. How well would it stop around?
Man, I don't know because at the time I didn't. So the Marines after me. That's why, like, I felt at first a little bit uncomfortable about doing this with you because the Marines that ended up staying in after me, they got hit the hardest.
Yeah.
So they were in Fallujah, and they were having to go from building to building.
Yeah.
So they would have a lot more experience with that. I didn't have much experience with that. Mine was like we invaded, everyone surrendered. Then right after we ceased fire, it was like a day or two after that, my platoon, I think, was the only one that sustained casualties at the time out of 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. We were doing a routine patrol, and it was night, and I was at the very rear So you had your fire teams, we were all split up, we're tactically moving up, doing our patrol, no big deal. And then I remember a close friend of mine, Kenny, who was the radio operator at the time, and the point man who was in front of the tip of our platoon. There was a wall on the side of us. He sees a bunch of Iraqis with AK-47s getting out, and like they're going against that wall. And he lets I think it was our lieutenant staff sergeant at the time, but we were told, just continue our patrol, right? And then next thing you know, I'm in the rear, but mind you, this isn't like, we're not that far apart. Right?
Was it like uncommon? Would it be common for that to happen? Like guys getting out with AK-47s?
That was uncommon, but again, it's so long ago, and I was only a saw gunner at the time, so I don't want to say something that's incorrect, but from my understanding, it was because we ceased fire, and they didn't engage on us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't act, and we continued our patrol, and then next thing you know, they just opened up on us, and they had tracer rounds. It almost looked like Star Wars. So they're firing at us, we fire back, and it's just, I'm here, like, I see, like, the bullets are just, like, right next to me, right? And so I go back, and then I start engaging the enemy, right? I turn my weapon, look at them, but I'm rear. So I have to, you know what I mean? Because we can't get ambushed, right? So even though I'm getting fired, I went back, but I went back and pointed my weapon to the rear. And I remember there was this big truck that comes in, and he's like, and I just opened fire on that thing. I don't know if what his objective is. We told him to stop, he didn't stop. But opened fire up on that. And
is this day or night?
This is night. Yeah, this is all night. This is why you can see the tracer lines just clear as day. And I remember my staff sergeant, he was the first one. So the way the Marines are designed to do, when we engage fire, you engage back. The 249 saw lays the suppression, but the Marines with the M16s, now we're bounding up. So we go straight toward the fire, right? And I was actually impressed because we actually, for most of us, some did not, some froze, but the mass majority of us immediately bounded up and laid fire. And my staff sergeant, who talked like this, he was like this fucking pussy, he was the first one to bound up, and he's yelling at everyone. He gets hit. He dies immediately. Oh, man. One of my fellow Marines who I was in the SOI with, his name was Owen. And he was also a saw gunner for his fire team. He takes a shot right in his Kevlar. I think it went up and ricocheted. Well, he drops. We eliminate the enemy. They're calling for a corpsman to help him out. The staff sergeant, he died. And I ran over there. I can see him. Now, being in law enforcement, I'm pretty sure it was that agonal breathing that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like gasping.
Yes. I didn't know that at the time.
Like where it's almost like your body is like, knows that it's supposed to be breathing, but everything else is messed up.
Right. So he's breathing like that, and I grab, let's see, I have my saw, I sling it, I grab one of his legs, another Marine grabs the legs, and then two other Marines grabs his arm. A Cobra comes down, so the radio operator, he calls in a Cobra. He comes, gets the staff sergeant, and gets the Marine. We find out the next day that the Marine who got shot in the cavalry, he died.
Really?
So, yeah.
So it shot in his helmet pretty much?
Yeah,
like
ricocheted.
Wrapped around it?
Yeah.
Man.
I know.
It's like a 1 in a million shot.
Mm-hmm. But that was like, so like my buddies who had had to stay. So when we came back, based on your, I guess your EAS, when you were supposed to get out, I was like 2 weeks away to where I didn't get stop lost. And the Marines who signed up around the same time I did, who I was very close to, they were 2 weeks after me, and they had to stay. And a buddy of mine who I still talk to all the time, the radio operator, he lives in Texas. He went to Fallujah, and he said that was like nothing he's ever experienced. But he said that firefight that we had, the initial one that I was talking to, he said that was the worst nighttime firefight he's ever experienced. But, yeah, so.
Let's take a step back, though, real quick.
Yeah.
How old are you at this point? 20?
20, 21.
20, 21.
Yeah.
So you guys pretty much get ambushed.
Yes.
You get attacked from two different directions?
No, just one direction for that one.
Okay, so the truck came in the same direction that the dudes were shooting at you from?
No, the truck came, I don't know, I can't say for certain that he was part of them.
Okay.
What I can say is we told him to stop, and he did not stop.
Okay. But the vast majority of the gunfire was coming from those?
It was coming from one direction.
Okay.
Yes,
makes sense now.
from one side. So you had a wall. They're against that wall for, their cover. They start just laying rounds at us. As that's happening, there's a truck from like caddy corner toward the rear that's driving up. One of the Marines gets up, tells him to stop. He doesn't stop. So,
okay, so you guys engage.
Yeah.
You said the Puerto Rican guy. What was his name again?
Staff Sergeant Tejada.
Mm-hmm. So Tejada gets up and he starts bounding towards the guys on the wall.
Yes.
He's the first dude to do that.
First dude.
First off, that's awesome. But, and your job in your position is to lay down suppressive fire.
Lay down suppression, but I'm holding security for the rear.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense.
So I'm responsible for the rear. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking fire because, like I said,
what's that like? What's it like getting shot from some direction that you can't look at?
Well, no, I did look at it, and I laid fire.
Yeah,
but I stopped and realized that, oh shit, like I'm responsible for the rear.
Yeah.
So they don't.
How hard was it to make that decision?
Man, dude, well, for one, it was a long time ago, and at the time, it felt like it was just a video game.
Really?
And also, it did not affect me at that time because when I was getting fights and all this stuff, it was not because I was some badass. It was because I had a very low self-esteem. And I hated myself at the time. And I think that kind of helped me in war because at that point in my life, I didn't care if I lived or died. So it really didn't. At that point,
It's a dangerous man. You know what I mean?
Well, it's a stupid man. But yes, It's a dangerous man. Because, you know me now. I have a lot of things to lose now in my life. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so do you want me to?
I just want to break down that whole firefight real quick. So first off, what was it? Was that the first time you'd ever seen a dead person in your entire life?
No. It was the first time that we engaged and we saw dead people. Okay. But as far as like during the invasion, no, they were blowing shit up, and there was one that was. This is a very sad story, but we would set up so like when we go to sleep, it was designed so when we invaded, we were scared of like what is that called, the poison gas that we thought they had.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I'm sure most people will know what you're talking about, too. I do know what you're talking about, but I don't remember the name of it.
So we had our suits thinking we were going to get gassed, right? So we're fully suited up. So we have our combat gear, But then we also have our, what is it, the mop suits?
You with it all the time?
Just for a couple months, the first couple months.
Like 24/7?
Yes, 24/7, because we're going to get gas.
Talking about mustard gas?
No, not mustard gas. What was it?
I can't remember. I know what you're talking about.
Because that was the whole point of
it was like
us.
a weapon of mass destruction that
Yes.
they said he was using on his own people, and I
Correct.
can't remember the name of
Yes.
it. It's going to drive me insane. I'm going to.
That was like
about it
one
for
of the
the
main
next
reasons why we
45
went.
minutes. Yeah.
And so we had our what was it, the mop suits, or anyway, we're all suited up, right? It's like Tyvek,
Yeah.
these big old suits, on top of our combat gear, and we had our gas mask on, and yeah, we did that for the first couple months.
Really?
Yeah,
All the
but
time.
yeah, but going back to that, so it wasn't. So we would set up our perimeter, right? One Marine was up, another Marine was sleeping, and it wasn't uncommon for Iraqis to try to invade that perimeter and get shot up, because we also have our Amtraks that have 40 caliber. It's a 40 caliber, and is it a Mark 19 attached to it? But they would just light them up. They would tell them to halt. They wouldn't halt, and they'd light them up. And one time there was a family that got lit up.
No way.
Yeah. So that was, I experienced that.
What was that like?
That was bad. It was,
Like in your 20-year-old brain, what were you thinking?
I was thinking, like, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening. The only time I cried was when my buddy, Dave Owen, when he was the saw gunner, the one that died, and we found out, that was the only time I cried during that time.
You mean the helmet guy?
Yeah.
That was your friend?
Yep. Yeah, very close friend.
I guess that's really what I'm asking is, like, what was the atmosphere around, like, so you guys get in this giant firefight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, dudes that you're close to are injured or dead. Like,
Yeah.
what's the atmosphere like that night? And how did you process that? Like,
Oh, man. So I didn't process it too well. So there was a new Marine that was, and I regret this to this day, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but he was asking about Firewatch. Like, he was brand new Marine. He had these glasses on we call BCs, birth control glasses, right? I had them as well.
did you really?
Yeah, I did. I'm blind as a bat. But I remember him asking something, and I was so pissed that I punched him right in the face, and I broke his glasses. And to this day, I feel bad about it. Like, because of anyone that knows me now, like I was, going into law enforcement, being a field trainer, like, that's not how I operate, because I know that, like, trying to scare someone to do something doesn't work.
Yeah.
Especially when you're relying on that person.
Mm-hmm.
But as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, and that's how I was taught.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of regrets for that. But no, to answer your question, no, I was a mess that night.
Really?
Yeah.
Was there any way did they give you any way of processing it? Like, were you guys
No, this was new to
helped
everyone.
in the process of, like, hey, let's, like, you just lost some dude? And then I guess what did you guys do the next day? Was it just right back on the grind?
Yeah, it's
back to the thing?
Yeah, we're in a foreign country. We don't have time to.
Yeah.
It's not like here. So that's funny you said that, because in combat, I've always thought, if you compare it to law enforcement, I would tell my fellow Marines that for me, my first few years as a police officer, especially like with the Ferguson effect, it's a lot more challenging, because you have to show a tremendous amount of restraint, more so than what a reasonable person would do.
Yeah.
Regardless of what anyone says, everyone knows that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, you just have to do it.
Yeah,
that's our responsibility.
Yeah.
And whereas when you're over in combat, it's you and your brothers. It's us versus them. You don't have to worry about the prosecutors trying to get you. appeasing citizens, appeasing police department, the higher, you're hit from all different angles. Like, for instance, like a St. Louis County cop, right? Or St. Louis City. They deal with a lot of stress mentally that is not necessarily like being scared of being shot. It's being scared of making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Which, in your experience, we talked about that when I spoke to you about your incident,
Yeah.
I didn't have to experience that.
Yeah. It's weird that you say that because Dan, same thing in the first invasion of Fallujah. If you ask him today what he thought, I don't want to say in general, like what he thought was more difficult, because I know that he went through a lot there, and I know that he experienced a lot there. But he says like the overall stress of law enforcement in general is harder.
100%. That's what I think.
What do you attribute it to? Just like administration, just oversight?
Yeah, so it's like, because you don't want to make the wrong decision. And when you're dealing with like criminals or people who don't want to get arrested, they're going to try to goat you into doing something that you don't want to do. And everyone, like I talk to like brand new officers that I field train, I don't care who you are. You could be the most disciplined police officer. Everyone has that oh shit moment where for their morality or moral compass, we'll say, they cross the line to the point like to where I'm not saying that they use excessive force, but for them, they went overboard. Someone pushed their buttons. Yeah. And it's up to a fellow police officer to stop that. You got to have a police officer that's not, they don't have, they weren't affected personally, right? Like an assisting officer who comes. Yeah. He's got to acknowledge that and not be scared like, oh, I got to take this report, right? No, he's got to take over that. I've done it. Police officers have done it for me. But I want to get into, because right now it looks like my life is just a fucking nightmare, right? And I'm sorry for cussing on
you're fine,
your show. So, you're fine. Because I really have to hit this home, because right now
Before we get there, let's finish up your time in Iraq.
Go ahead.
So you're involved in that firefight. You lose 2 of your guys. Mm-hmm. How much more time did you have in Iraq?
And 6 or 7 months.
And did that incident, did it change the way that you viewed the rest of your time in Iraq?
No, not at the point. I mean, it was back to normal business as usual. And then, we would eventually, like, once we, like, took over Iraq, then we start setting, like, bases up within the country, and, no. At that time, no. But it's not like, it's almost like survival of the fittest.
Yeah, you're just too busy. You're just too busy to deal with it.
Correct.
Makes sense. Yeah. I could see that. I really could. I could see, like, tomorrow's a new day. I got 6 more months. Let's go.
But I'll tell you what, dude, that's not. I'm gonna. Well, go on. Answer your questions, or ask your questions.
I don't have any more. I'm just saying. Okay. So you're there for 6 more months, and then
that's not what affected me the most, though.
What do you mean?
That's what I'm getting at. So what affects me is, like, you know how I am in law enforcement or criminal investigator. I am extremely hyper focused. Yeah. On my objective and accomplishing the mission, right? Yeah. I didn't have that. So, like, when we're going back to the Marine Corps, I tell people they probably wouldn't have recognized me because I was a very immature kid who was very selfish, had nothing to lose with a low self-esteem. I didn't get it, right? So we come back from Iraq. Eventually, I get honorably discharged. You look at my DD-214, looks like I'm like some war hero, and I'm not. I was like, in my mind, I'm just like a fucking train wreck. And I get out, and that's when shit just fucking goes crazy. That's where I'm like getting in fights all the time as a civilian. And at this point, my mom and dad, they're now separated. My mom finds someone else. my stepdad, who's now deceased, but he turned out to be a great guy. He got me a job. He was owned a carpenter. He was a carpenter, right? He had a little company. Got me hired on, and I would not have been working if it wasn't for him. I end up meeting my ex. She had a very addictive personality. She wasn't responsible at the time. We had a child. We decided to have another kid. Things were a mess between us. And it's not her fault. It was my fault as well. And I end up getting laid off, getting my electric turned off, my truck repossessed.
Not the pride, but what do you think are like, what's leading to all of this? Like, what do you think is leading to all of the, like, all this stuff that you're talking about? It's like, you get out, you're like, I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for my stepdad, and my life is a mess. And, like, what do you think, now looking back at this time in your life, what was missing? Like, you said you had a low self-esteem.
I will tell you exactly. So when I grew up, even though my dad was, I hate talking about my father like this because now he's my best friend. He hasn't drank in years. He like sponsors people and all that. Like he's like just a great person. My mom too, so. But, so I grew up, I went to Corpus Christi. We go to church, right? And my family, my dad had 9 brothers. My grandparents lived in Jennings at the time when I was a small child. And we had like a family priest. My faith, you know how like when you're a kid and then you're taught God, going to church, you just think that things are going to work out. Like when you believe in God, you just think that things will work itself out.
Yeah.
When things got bad for me, I slowly lost my faith, where I just did not believe in anything. And it just was one bad thing after another. And it wasn't, so I got to fix this, right? So let me go back to this, right?
Yeah, dude, you're good. We're just having a conversation.
So, my gas is turned off, electric turned off, truck repossessed. We get an eviction notice for the apartment. I end up, my uncle, who was worked for Jennings Public Works, he gets me on the street department. I'm not drinking as much as I used to. I'm saving it for the weekends. But I'm starting to get things settled, but I'm only making like $27,000 a year.
Yeah.
Like working there. And I start meeting the police officers at Jennings. And I meet them. They're like, hey, sometimes we hire police officers within. Well, I didn't even really like law enforcement at the time, but I like them. So I start looking into it. I was like, you know what? I don't know. Maybe this will be something. But again, like I did so much shit, like as far as like, who am I to be a police officer? I mean, I may not be like a convicted felon or anything like that, but I just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you could have been. You
could have, sure. And so anyway, I ended up putting my application in. I went in front of their board. I just tried to sell myself. They needed officers anyway because it was Jennings. So they sponsored me, took me through the academy.
Really?
Yeah. So I went and St. Louis County ends up taking over. At that point, I'm living with the mother of my 2 kids. She has like 10 or 12 active warrants for arrest for like misdemeanors. And things are not our relationship. We both know that it's only a matter of time. We're now like bind because we need our income to survive.
Makes sense.
And so St. Louis County, they do a background on me. I have at this point, I'm a police officer for 10 months. So I graduate the academy. I get field trained. I go on the road. And then a short time later, within 10 months, St. Louis County comes and takes over. So I go through their process, and I pass the polygraph, the written test, all the stuff, right? And I get to the final board, and she didn't, I'm saying, hey, I'm basically like, it's like from what I was told, when you go to the commander's board or whatever.
Yeah.
It's essentially saying, hey, congratulations, we're hiring you, you passed everything. In my case, that was not.
Really?
They said, yeah, you're living with someone who's got active warrants for their arrest. Like, we can't justify hiring you when you're living. And I tried to explain myself, and they weren't having it. So they said, reapply in 6 months. So that day, I drove home. I took my 2 kids, and I left her. I lived with my aunt, and she lived at Jennings. I lived in her basement. And then my mom at this point, because I said she separated from my father in an apartment, so I would bounce back and forth. I'd take my kids there, to Highland, and just back and forth, while I would just keep putting out applications, right? And then eventually Overland.
It's pretty interesting you say all this about your life, though, because a lot of times people think cops have everything together. You know what I mean? Like, they have everything together. They've never had a difficult point ever in their life. Like, we get it all the time on the road. Like, you wouldn't understand. Like, you don't understand.
Oh, yeah, no. But,
like, you don't understand the things that I've been through.
That's funny you said that, is because...
Like, I'm just a poor white kid from North County, dude.
Right.
Like, I do understand you way more than you think that I do.
That's... I'm kind of sidetracking a little bit, but I think that's why I get so many confessions.
I think so too, dude. I think you're just like, you're just really genuine. You know what I mean? I think people can see that, and like they can recognize that you're like a genuine person. It's like, and I feel like it's easier for me sometimes to communicate with criminals, because I didn't grow up in the best environment.
Yeah.
I grew up super poor. It was nothing for my mom not to be able to pay the bills. You know what I mean? Like, we had our lights turned off, and we had our food. We were eating like peanut butter and jellies for dinner, and like, we didn't have all these nice things. Our cars backfired. We lived in North St. Louis. We got beat up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so people always think that like cops are like these. I came from like this very privileged background, and that I've never been through anything in my life, and same thing with you. Like, you've never been through. You wouldn't understand me. And sometimes I find it easier to talk to criminals and people that have like a similar upbringing
100%
than it is to talk to like I'm going to go in this meeting with this administrator. You know what I mean?
Well, I think with my personal life, with my me just being an overall bad person early in my early 20s, right? And interacting, like, I lived in a predominantly black neighborhood to a predominantly white neighborhood. So I've had the experience to just communicate with various types of people. So I can find common ground with almost anyone. But let me get to my point, right? So I end up getting hired in Overland. I'm still drinking at the time. I'm there for a year. I'm doing all right. The field training officer, he says that, I barely graduated high school, so I can't type a report to save my life. And he's like, you are the worst report writer, right? I had my own personal rock bottom when I went out drinking, and I went to Pops, and I stayed up all night. I went there by myself. I took a shot. I fell off the bar stool. The bouncer came and got me, or told me to get out, made me get out. I couldn't even walk, so it was not like I could, like, I'm not saying that I'm like some, like, it wasn't because, like, I was too drunk to drive, right? I literally couldn't drive. Like, I couldn't even walk. And so my dad comes and gets me, and who I said was this bad person. Anyway, he got sober.
Was he sober when he came and got you?
Yes.
Really?
And he's the one that got me, and I went to an AA meeting with him, and I started getting involved in that. And anyway, I stopped drinking entirely, right? So I haven't drank in 9 years. And let's see, how long have I been here? No, 10 years. Because it was a year or two after Overland, I went from being worst report writer, then eventually just kind of learning how to just write average reports, and being an average police officer. I stopped drinking. I filled my void with doing positive things, making myself do stuff, to officer of the year. The first.
Really?
Then I start really getting into, making myself stay extra with report writing. I would pick like the best report writers. Like, okay, what are they doing? Until I established my own way of doing my own writing.
Yeah.
And I remember when I left Overland to go to Fallon, one of the captains in Overland said, so mind you, I was the worst report writer. I leave Overland as the best report writer.
Really?
And then within Overland, so I told you about football, like skipping, like to go drink and all this stuff. So I was a quitter, right? In my head, that's what I had. So I made myself do guns and hoses. And I remember I was smoking a pack a day at the time. And so I went in there, but I was
that in the back of your head? Like at this point, you're like 20-something years old. Were you still thinking about like,
No, we're fast forwarding now. So maybe so the audience can understand. So I joined the Marine Corps from when I was 19, got out when I was 23, a few years of carpentry work, a year of working at the Jennings Street Department. So by 28, 29, I become a police officer.
Okay.
So now I'm going into my 30s.
Okay, so you're 30-something years old. Are you still thinking back to that Joe that quit football?
I did with the guns and hoses.
I know, and that's what I'm saying is like,
well, I'm going to lead up to
like
that.
15 years later, you're still thinking about the Joe
100%.
who you used to be.
So I remember thinking, because I was strong and I told you I was getting all these fights, and I remember going in there and I'm like, I got paired up with some guy who I thought I was just going to beat the shit out of. I'm like, look at this guy. I'm just going to walk right through him just because I was strong, right? So I was muscling it, and I might have did well the first round. Second round, he just starts piecing me up. Third round, I could barely stand. And I remember leaving that boxing ring thinking, like, I looked at Tim Burke, who's actually the boxing coach in St. Louis County. I was like, man, I really suck, huh, Tim? He's like, you don't suck. He's like, you just don't know what you're doing. It's like, dude, keep coming. And I don't know what convinced me to come back, but it was a pride thing. I was like, man, I'm going to do it. So I went from boxing, getting my butt kicked, to toward the end of Guns and Hoses. Now I'm the one beating everyone. So I quit smoking. I start chewing, which I chew now. That's another. I can't give up everything.
Stop, dude.
But I chew, and now I'm starting to beat people up. And I remember I get paired up with a firefighter who's like 6'8", 6'7", and for the box off, he ends up just beating the heck out of this St. Louis City cop to go to the Guns and Hoses. So that's how they match you up, right? So you have this, so
there's like a behind the scenes bracket.
Yeah, so you train, you do your training at I think St. Louis City has a gym, St. Louis County, Hit Squad now. It didn't at the time because Ryan, he was just starting boxing at the time. So I was actually boxing with him. And he was not, if anyone knows him now, he's a good boxer now. But he wasn't back then. He was just starting. And I get paired up with this guy. So we're training. I start out horrible. I work into being like good, for my skill level. And then we have a box off. So I have to box someone. Everyone's got to box someone. And then they rate you based on your skill level. So they try to pair you with someone equal.
Competitive?
Yeah, to make it competitive. Well, the only one that they could match me up with per my skill level was a guy who was like 6'7". And I was like, and he just beat the heck out of this guy in the box off. And I was like, all right, yeah, I'll take it. Tim's like, all right, you're going to box him. I'm like, all right.
This camera, I don't know if you guys can see, but Joe's like 5'6". And this dude's like 6'7".
Yeah.
Okay, 5'7".
Almost 5'9". Almost 5'9".
Yeah, in heels.
So I get paired up with this guy, Dick, and I remember going and like we're like one of the last fights. I'm like, man. And for this Guns N' Hoses match, it's like hours and hours. So you start out when you're competing thinking like all, your anxiety, everything, nerves, going crazy. I'm boxing this guy that's a lot bigger than me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Well, hours pass because we're on one of the last fights. So I go from nervous to like, holy shit. Like, I got another few hours before I even box. So I psych myself out. And then, well, anyway, eventually I box. And I'll never forget, like, the first round, he was getting the better of me. It didn't look good. Second round, I think he got overzealous because I caught him, knocked him down. And he gets up. I didn't knock him out, but he gets up, and that changed the whole fight. So now he was reluctant to engage with me. I'm the aggressor. I end up winning a decision. And then, anyway, that changed as far as an athletic perspective, that kind of like, holy shit, like if I put my mind to something, I can do it.
Yeah, I think it's more than athletic, right? Like, I think.
Well, and that's what I'm going to lead to, right? So now I set goals in my head. So what I do to fill that void, to avoid like, when you stop drinking or you start out doing like engaging in, like say right now you're a young kid or you're a police officer who's struggling, you drink as sort of a vice, to cope with whatever, right? You have to fill that void with something, whether it's like spending more time with your family, your kids, friends. You have to fill that void. So what I did was I would constantly, everything that I was nervous of as a kid, I would do. So I told you that at first I was scared to punch a guy in the face. I ended up getting all these fights. I was a quitter, so I do the Guns N' Hoses. And I start boxing off and on for like 6 years. I fight an amateur fight, another Guns N' Hoses match. I win those. Then I start doing judo. For anyone who doesn't know judo, think of Ronda Rousey, UFC. It's throws, submissions. I figure this is beneficial to law enforcement, right? So I start learning that. I'm just constantly challenged. College is another thing. So this is actually another important thing. So I started out thinking I was this stupid kid who couldn't accomplish anything. So I made myself go back to college. Technically, I'm going into my junior year, and I have a 4.0 average. Straight A's, right?
Where do you think this "I'm this stupid kid" came from?
I really think that it goes back to my family life, right? So my dad was a mean drunk. My mom used pills to cope with that.
Did you just feel unimportant?
Yeah, it was just like a horrible family life and just no one teaching me the right way to do things. I didn't know how to live my life. And then not going to school, it's like with the report writing, of course I'm not going to be able to type a police report. Like I barely graduated high school because I didn't ever put any effort into it. Yeah. So I don't even know what I could do, what I'm capable of. Yeah. It wasn't until I start challenging myself that I realized that, dude, I can do, no one's better than me. Yeah. I don't care what, if I want to be a doctor, I'm going to work twice as hard to be a doctor. That's just how my mind is wired now. But it was never wired that way. You have to reprogram your mind, and anyone can do it. Yeah. You just got to put in the work. So now, fast forwarding, so I go from this guy that can't do anything to now someone who's, I don't want to say cocky, but someone who's sure of himself. I'm confident that if you give me an objective, I can do it as good, if not better than anyone.
I think that's something you learn in law enforcement too. I really do. I think you slowly learn throughout your law enforcement career that the things that you thought were super difficult, cops are really, really, we're not listen, I know some dumb cops. I'm not saying every cop is the most intelligent person in the world. But I think like if you gave me a task, like when I set out to start 1078, when I was like, I want to do this, like there's something about that alpha type of, like the vast majority of cops are alphas. There's something about that type of mindset, and like it could be really good. Obviously, like you can start an organization like this. You can start doing what you're doing, you know, with your investigative skills and with judo and with boxing and all the other things. It can also be really bad if you take that, if you don't have somebody like you're my somebody in my life, that when I get a little bit too big for my britches, a phone call from Joe to be like, hey man,
and vice versa.
Maybe check yourself a little
Absolutely.
bit there. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
calm down. You know, like this isn't the person that you want to be. Like you want to be this type of person. So maybe let's try that out. But there's something about cops, man. Like you experience a lot of bad things throughout this job, but you really realize how resilient you can be as a human, you know, and you realize that, at least for me, it's like I wanted to be a good canine handler. So I just dove into it, dude. You know, like my first dog by the time he retired was a robot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I get into the shooting, and I'm like, man, I want to change what the response is to these things. Like, I don't think that we're doing ourselves a service. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we're doing the things that we should be doing for our own community. It's like, well, nobody's changing it, so I will. Like, I'll start this thing. And I feel like there's a lot of connections, like you, like the way that you are as a person.
Well, I think you can find, like I said, you can find common ground with anyone. Like, for instance, you, for example, right? You were an outstanding wrestler in high school. You know, you had that passion, that drive as a freshman, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know you're not going to brag about yourself, but most accomplished wrestlers, they start at a very young age, where you dove right in and you're beating like you're competing with like state champions, right? Because you were all in. I had that same mindset later in my life, and that's my regret. Because when we talked about like going back, right, where I said I didn't have a regret when you asked me about like the firefights and like actually like, you know, shooting at people and killing people. My regret is that I wasn't mature enough to be a leader back then. Like, I know what I'm capable of now. Like, anyone who knows me knows that, like for instance, if there's like a case that needs to be solved, I'm pretty sure you can ask anyone that I'm usually myself or someone else or maybe a couple others. Like, I'm their go-to to get it done because I will put everything into it. I didn't have that same mindset back then because I didn't believe in myself. It wasn't until I start challenging myself, whether it's school, like going back to college, and giving myself a goal saying, like, I have to get straight A's to show that I'm not that dumb kid who failed third grade and barely graduated high school. In boxing, I had to do Guns and Hoses just to say that I saw it. I seen it through. You know, I started it and I finished it. And then same with judo. Now, so I had to take a little hiatus from college, a year hiatus to be exact. So I'm actually glad that you had this podcast, that you invited me, because my goal right now, my short-term goal, is to get my black belt in judo, which I'm testing in 2 weeks for. Then I'm going to start focusing more on college.
Yeah.
So those are my two goals I gave myself within the next 5 years. Finish my bachelor's, get my black belt in judo. I'm getting the judo black belt first, and then I'm going to get the bachelor's.
Dude, it's so crazy because I think Joe Rogan has a saying that all the best people that he knows, the most interesting people, the coolest people that he knows come from difficulties. They don't come from like the, you know, super privileged lifestyle. Everybody that he knows that he wants to be friends with comes from like a background like yours, you know, like a broken home and whatever else. And I think maybe it's because of the things you're talking about. Maybe it's because it's like you've established that resilience in yourself. You know what I mean?
I just think, this is me personally, for me, everyone has their own sort of rock bottom, right, in life. I feel like I've experienced that. and I could only go up. It's either give up or go forward, you know. I chose to go forward, and I was able to, you know, get myself out of the trenches. And then once you establish that work ethic and that importance that you are valuable, I don't care who you are. You know, you could, like your buddy who teaches autistic kids, right? You know, I'm talking about the autistic kids, not your buddy. Everyone has some meaning in this life. You just got to find it, you know, regardless what it is. And it starts with confidence, and you got to actually go out of your way to do something like your podcast. You know, you're doing, like when you had that injury with wrestling and you were going to start doing judo and stuff and grappling, right? And get back into this. Like, this is your passion right now. Whereas, like, you know, judo now.
I'd love to be grappling more. I wish I had more time. I really
No,
do.
I know, but, like, I need that outlet.
Yeah.
You know, I have to have goals like that, like positive goals, so I don't do stupid things. And I think that my life experience now in hindsight, or like looking back, it's like I'm pretty, like when I was on the road before detective, I always had a knack for finding the right cars and you know, like finding felons, right? Or people with meth. Like it wasn't uncommon for me. It's because I associated myself at one time with bad people. I know what to look for, right? And when I speak to those people, and then they, you know, they confess or convey whatever's going on, right? And they're like, how are you getting to communicate? It's like, well, because I don't judge them. Like, who am I to judge anyone? You know? I had a little bit of luck. I took advantage of that luck. Luck with, obviously, hard work and effort, right?
Yeah.
I believe that everyone has a window that's going to open. You're either going to go through that window or you're going to close the window. You know, I chose to go through that window. Everyone's going to have that opportunity. And we deal with people during their worst times, right? Yeah. And they don't see that there's a pathway to success. They only see the bad, and I think that's what you said, like, you don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Just like kind of a victim-y mentality.
Yes.
Like, poor me, poor me, poor me.
And it goes to show you how people are so much alike. Is like, you can take, say, like a black person or a minority or a poor person, right? Or like, say you stop a black person and he's like, you're only stopping because I'm black. That sort of entitlement, like, to try to get out, is the same type of mindset as you pull that rich white kid over, right? And he's like, you know who my father is? You can't pull me over. Two different worlds, two of similar mindsets.
Yeah.
That sense of entitlement, you know, like they're owed something.
Yeah.
You get a rich person, poor person, same mindset.
Yeah.
That's why I'm really under the belief that anyone, you put your mind to it, you can accomplish whatever you want.
So, how have you changed as a dad? Because, like, seeing how important that fatherly role is in your own life, like, so how much that impacted you growing up, and how you, for the first 30-something years of your life, you're, like, trying to fill, in my opinion, I don't know, but it seems like you were trying to fill a void that started in your childhood, and it took you till you're, like, 30-some-odd years old to do that. What are you doing for your kids that you think is going to change that?
That's funny. I'm actually going through that battle right now with my oldest boy. So I have to get this out real quick, especially since it's on a podcast. So my ex, when I left her, right, she ended up finding a good man who's a vice principal. And he treats my kids like they're his. He was the one who got my ex out of all the legal troubles, you know, and she's doing very well right now. And I think that's a big part because of him. So I have a good relationship with him and their mom. And I have a 7-year-old now with my fiance. So I have 3 kids, right? And we work together to raise my children, my oldest two. So my two with my ex, I'll work with the stepdad and mom to benefit them. What I do differently is, like, you know how some people, like, for instance, if you live in that abusive household, it's not uncommon for the person who was abused to eventually be the abuser.
Yeah, do the exact same thing.
I'm doing the complete opposite. I'm actually, out of the 4 parents, so you got me, my fiance, stepdad, and their mom. I'm the most gullible one. So, like, my 16-year-old who's, like, goes out and drinking and stuff like that, and they're like, he's up to no good. And I'm like, oh, he's fine. He's not doing anything wrong. I really believe that because it's my kid, because I want to, you know. So I took that exact. So I'm working on being more firm with them.
Really?
So they know that I'm always there for them.
Yeah.
And I always go to their sporting events and whatever they choose to do. So my son, my oldest boy, does track and cross country. My daughter, cross country and cheerleading. And then my 7-year-old does the wrestling, right? And I'm trying to make it a point to attend all their sporting events.
Bo Nickel, man.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't want to. We'll see about that. But I don't want to. I try to stay as much as I can. Let them know that I am there for them. And if they ever need something, please feel free to reach out to me.
Did you feel like that was the biggest thing that was missing in your childhood? Like, you just didn't feel like anybody was really there?
Yeah, there was just no. My parents weren't present. I mean, they were, but they weren't. You know, they didn't. My dad was more concerned about drinking and
just didn't seem like they took an interest in you.
That's correct. In fact, he's the one. He's the reason why I joined the Marine Corps, because I hated him at the time. And now it's like we're so much alike, everyone tells us. So he'll make like these little jokes. They're like corny, and I'll make the same jokes. And he's like my best friend now. You know, I have a very good relationship with my dad and my mother. My mother doesn't, since when they split. My mom stopped using the painkillers and all that stuff, you know. So, but no, I am so. When you said that about, like, what do you do different with your kids than when I was a kid? I'm actually too soft, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I just can't hit my kid.
Yeah,
you know. And I need to work on just being a little more strict with them.
Yeah, I can see that, man. You don't want to recreate that. You know, like, the last thing you want to do is be the same thing that you despised.
I just want them to know that they're, like, I want them to live in a loving family.
Yeah.
You know? And, like, my oldest boy, he's back. It's like a roller coaster with him. He's, unlike me, he knows that he's smart. He just chooses not to do the work, right? And then I'll take something away, so he'll go from D's and F's to A's in a matter of like 3 weeks.
Really?
It's just him being lazy and not doing work.
Yeah.
My daughter has got more of her dad's mindset to where she's got to work hard for it. But she gets A's and B's, and she's disappointed with herself if she gets a B. Like, oh, I'm stupid, I got a B. I'm like, wow. You know, it's just... I try to, I don't know. I'm still trying to find that balance in life, I guess.
Yeah.
I think I'm doing all right. But
I think one of the other things I want to come back to is at the very beginning of this, you talked about what your relationship was like with God whenever you were a kid, and then how you kind of like lost that relationship with God. What's your relationship with God like now?
Oh, well, I told you about how I dove in the whole thing. Like, I read the Bible front to back.
That's what I think the biggest thing, if I had to wrap you in a bow and if I had to tell someone about you, is like, you will dive into whatever it is you're passionate about 100%. And I think a lot of that, like back in your drinking days, is because when you're passionate about something, you give it 150%. And like back in the day, you were passionate about doing dumb stuff and drinking, and you and put the pedal to the metal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, goes back to like your relationship with God. I remember sitting car to car with you, and we're having conversations about God, and I'm like kind of just poking the bear, seeing if you're interested, and then Next thing you know.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I am not like, if you're asking right now, is my faith? No, I believe in God 100%.
Yeah.
That's not an issue. It's me like going to church consistently because I'm lazy. But as far as like when I had my, like things in life start going well. And, when things go well,
you don't need God.
You don't need God, right? And then when things start, the pieces start falling apart. In my life, before they fell apart again, I start really doing some soul searching. And for me, like, I need like proof that God, like, I know that the chances of Jesus coming down and saying, like, for me, I believe in Jesus Christ, right? The chances of him coming down and saying, hey, here I am, it's probably not going to happen, right? So, but I need like evidence to believe. I just don't want that blind faith. So I read a few books, Case for Christ, that book. What's that book called? With the police officer that wrote the.
What is it? What did I buy? I bought it for you. I can't remember the name of it now. Cold Case Christianity.
Yes, that was a great book. That was fantastic. Yeah. And like I said, I read the Old Testament, New Testament, and for me, I found the evidence that I needed.
What was it?
No, I'm not gonna like the evidence.
Yeah.
Well, so like for instance, when with the disciples, right? Back then, like being a Jew, being with the Jewish faith, right? You don't just change religions and go and follow this man who's claiming to be the Son of God. And the fact that they followed him, and then Jesus gets crucified, and then they turn their backs toward him, like, oh, I guess he's not the Son of God. Then he comes back down, and now basically they're all in.
Yeah.
Right? So they have nothing to gain except a horrible, painful death.
Yeah.
Whatever they saw, they felt compelled to spread that message, regardless if they're going to die. And the fact that they're going against their faith back then.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like one thing that got me. And so that was my proof. And then the demeanor for Jesus, right? So when everything in the New Testament is quoted by Jesus, it's just, there's nothing mean. Everything is like to help people. And the fact that I've kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of the fact that when he was crucified and he's asking God, the Father, to forgive these people, for they don't know what they're doing. Like, that's like, that is complete opposite of me. I want to like punish them.
Yeah.
And he's asking for forgiveness for them.
Yeah. Last week I interviewed Elizabeth Snyder. Well, Tucker now is her last name. Blake's wife.
Yeah.
And dude, it was so profound. At the very end of it, we talked about how she forgave the kid that shot Blake.
Sure.
Dude, it was like, you just don't see that, man, without God. You don't see that. Like, my natural instinct without God is not to do that. Like, my natural instinct is exactly what you just said. It's like when somebody wrongs me, my natural instinct is I want to punish this person. Like,
and I still have issues with that.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm not going to tell someone like, oh, you need to, dive into Christianity. You need to believe in Christianity. That's your decision, right? I found what I needed to find for me to believe in God. Yeah. And if someone asks me, I'll tell them like you're doing, but that's their decision. I am no place to judge, because if anyone knows me, I still make stupid mistakes. I still do stupid things like a normal human being.
Not really. Not as bad as you used to be.
I acknowledge
You've made leaps and bounds, dude.
And I acknowledge when things start going bad, like, okay, I need to address this. I need to fix myself.
So let's wrap this up with what you're doing now. Like, what's Joe Judge doing now?
Oh, man. So I am a detective with the O'Fallon Police Department. I am a father of 3. I live with my fiance. We've been together 10 years. Everyone Why aren't you getting married?
I know a jeweler, dude. I know a jeweler.
It's going to happen. We're going to get married. So what Joe does now is I put a lot of focus on my job. I try to raise my kids the best I can, and to be just a loving, I guess, husband, right? In the eyes of Jesus. No, I'm just kidding. No, I need to get married, but because I love my fiance, and without her, I actually credit her for. That's another thing too, like reading the Bible, right? It took me 3 months to read the entire Bible. I credit her for speed reading. She taught me how to speed read. So like when I would read something and I would try to retain that, I would read it word for word, and I would read out loud to myself. You know, like the kid's name is Frank. I would be like, the kid's name is Frank. She told me to try to read with my mouth closed and try to take in the whole sentence. And it took me a couple books, but now I got to the point to where when you speed read and you keep your mouth closed, you can kind of take in that whole sentence as opposed word for word.
I do that, but I'm like, I have to be dyslexic or something, dude. I have to be.
Why do you say that?
I'm like the worst reader ever.
See, I don't know.
I'm seriously like the worst reader ever.
Well, you got to read more than a book.
Yeah, I know, dude. I read the Bible. The best book.
I'm not saying that. All right. Touche.
Yeah. No, but I'm a horrible reader. And it's something that, like, I just don't like doing because I'm so bad at it. But
that's why you got to make yourself.
I know, dude. That's what this whole podcast has been about, forcing yourself to do things to make yourself better.
Dude, this is amazing. So right now you're doing a good thing. Hopefully I can help.
You do, man. You help as my friend. You know what I mean? Like,
I appreciate it.
Seriously, I had you on here not because, like, you haven't been involved in a police-involved shooting, but I know you, and I know the type of person that you are. I know the things that you've been through in your life, and I know that the rebound that Joe Judge made from, like you said yourself, you're getting ready to lose your car, lose your house. You have no utilities, to the person that I know now who's a fantastic investigator, a good dad, a good husband, chasing Jesus. A lot of things went into Joe Judge making those steps, or taking those steps. And although you haven't been involved in a police-involved shooting, all the stuff that you've done through the military and, firefights and all this other stuff, that reaches a whole audience that our podcast has never really talked to, and 90% of the dudes that I work with are veterans. Like, almost, I'm like the outcast. Like a guy that got into this at 21 years old and became a cop and then was never in the military. Like, the vast majority of guys that do this job are guys like you. They get out of the military. They're looking for brotherhood. They're looking for something that they feel like they're needed, that they feel like they're going to do good in a community, that they find meaning in this job. And they go and they become a cop. Like, they go from the Marine Corps. You have your boys and all your friends, and you guys are together. You're, like, trying to accomplish this task. You get out of there, and what do? You go search for that. You go search for that whole thing again. And, so I'm truly the outcast. I think probably high 75, 80% of the people that I work with are veterans. So I knew you had a wild veteran story, so I wanted to have you on here, and I wanted you to tell your story. And
I tried to water it down a bit, and
did a good
hopefully,
job,
hopefully I got the message across, because it's not. I'm only on this podcast for your project, right?
Yeah.
And I want it to be geared toward law enforcement, right? Because that's where the resources need to go for right now. Mm-hmm. Like military, we got a million things, right? Law enforcement, when you're in an officer-involved shooting, you don't have those resources available, right? And but hopefully my message will resonate with some veteran, or someone who's not doing well.
Yeah.
Because my life's good now. I have nothing. I have a loving family. My job can be a pain in the butt sometimes, but overall, I enjoy it very much. Life's good right now.
Yeah. Life's always good. God's always good, dude.
Yeah.
He's always good.
Yeah.
We'll end it here, man. But I hope you know you're my dude. You're the guy, like, when I need to be checked, I expect you to check me. So, yeah.
Well, you need to start training with us, and I'll do that.
All right, dude.
So,
all right. Yeah, we'll end it there.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for hanging in there to the end of the episode. I really appreciate you guys listening. One thing that our organization has kind of been struggling with is getting notified of officers who have been involved in officer-involved shootings. One way that we're trying to combat that is if you go to our website, www.1078project.com, you will see that we've added a place for our audience to refer officers. So if you are aware of a police officer who's been involved in an officer-involved shooting, you can go to our website, you put in their name, the department that they work for, and as much information as you have about them, whether they have kids, how many kids they have, if they're married. It just helps us design the box to the best of our ability to make sure we're giving them as many resources as we can. Also, if you're trying to support the 1078 Project, you can go to our website as well. You can see there's a place where you can buy merch. The Crafty Midwest Mommy has been grateful enough to donate all the proceeds for the t-shirts back to us. So if you're looking for a practical way to get a nice t-shirt and also support the cause, you can go to our website as well for that. And with all that being said, I really appreciate all the support. The podcast is doing much better than I thought it would be doing at this point, and that wouldn't be possible without you guys, our audience. So thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next week. The 1078 Project podcast is proudly sponsored by Deemed Fit. Deemed Fit is an activewear and a leisure company created for first responders. Be a part of their movement to instill confidence, motivation, and a willingness to keep pushing forward. Deemed Fit is a first responder-owned company looking to help first responders and their friends stay as physically and mentally fit as possible. Stay Deemed Fit.